Have you heard the old saying, don't judge a book by its cover? But that's what people do, right? We judge everything by outward appearances. In my experience, a great album cover can make or break the decision on whether I buy an album. So go on a journey with me as we look at some great album cover designs and talk about why I believe that you need a personal designer for your album artwork. This is Judged by the Cover. Welcome to the first episode of the Judged by the Cover podcast. Today we are going to be talking the album cover that started this thing I call JW Creates. It's not an album cover that I created, but it was the cover that made me want to pursue designing album covers. But before we get to that, make sure that you stay tuned until the end of the podcast because I'm going to give you a sneak peek into a couple of the album covers that we're going to be talking about in the near future. I'm also going to introduce a segment that will start on the next show, and I really need your input and feedback for that segment to be successful. Also, make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're listening on your favorite podcast app, make sure you hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on future episodes. So with all that said, let's begin. I mentioned that this is the album cover that started JW Creates because when I saw the behind the scenes video of how the designer made this cover, my mind literally exploded. It was like this light bulb turning on moment, and I knew that this was what I wanted to do. I knew that what I wanted to do was make album covers, and not just make them because they're cool, even though they are, but I wanted to be able to tell a story about a song or an album through great design. So, what's the name of the album? I will almost guarantee that you have never seen this album cover or heard of this album or the artist. And if you have, then you're a lot cooler than I'm giving you credit for. But the name of the album is Minorville by Derek Minor. Derek Minor, Minorville. You see the play on the name with the artist name there? Trust me, it's going to make more sense here in a minute, especially for those of you that are listening to the audio-only form of this podcast, because I'm going to break down and try and explain what the album cover looks like. So the album cover itself, it's grayscale or just gray in color, and the main portion or the center of it is a side profile of the artist's face. So you have this man's face, kind of a side profile, but it's made out of these wood building cutouts that look like a cityscape. That's the main element of the cover. The only other thing that you really have is that up in the top left-hand corner, you have the artist's name and the album name in just a simple all caps white font. So from a design aspect, there's not a lot of details to discuss. And you may be thinking, okay, this is cool, but not all that exciting. Why did this turn you on to making album covers? And the secret, it's in my favorite part. It's in the behind the scenes video. Before this album's release in 2013, the artist and the label did a lot of promotion and hype for this album. This was the fourth studio album for Derek Minor. He was also going through a name change. So he was previously going by the name Pro, changing to Derek Minor at this same time. So it was necessary to really promote the heck out of this album to, make sure that there wasn't, any confusion there. Of these promotional videos, my favorite one was the one that talks about or shows the making of the album cover. The album cover was made by a designer that goes by the name Invisible Creature. This guy's been making album covers since about 2000, it looks like. Maybe before that, but from what I could tell on his website, at least 2000. And he's done album covers for the Foo Fighters, Lecrae, Young the Giant, Alice in Chains, just to name a few. So he's not a no-name designer. He's done a few, and he kind of knows what he's doing. What I love about this is seeing that process. It starts with the designer. He's doing the layout for the building. So on his computer, he's kind of laying out the shapes, what he wants it all to look like, and kind of get an idea what he needs to do it. From there, it starts going to clips of another guy who I think is the designer's uncle, who's cutting out these blocks of wood, shaping them into different buildings. And if you can see the cover, you will see the different shapes and the sizes, just like a real cityscape. They went as far as cutting lines and shaping the wood blocks to show some different architectural features. So really getting, not a ton of detail, but getting some detail into it to really kind of set the different buildings apart. From there, it goes to them setting up the cityscape. So you see them lining up all the pieces, making sure that the spacing is all correct. And then they go into moving the light around, really trying to figure out what makes the best shadows with this design. They also take a fog machine and kind of play around with it just to give it the right movement, the right feel. So this rather simple design that you see on the cover has a ton of work that went into it. And really what they did was create Minorville. Derek Minor opens the album with a song called Lost in Minorville. And it's a song that's talking about this idealized world called Minorville. It's really talking about this idealized world that we have in our minds, right? This world where there's no issues, there's no pain, there's no nothing, blah, 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 so on and so forth. And in a tongue-in-cheek way, he kind of calls out our society and some of the issues that we face. It's a great listen. It's a great album because the album goes on to, kind of tackle these in a little bit more detail. But I highly recommend you give it a listen. Even though that it came out about 9 years ago, it still sounds very good. I got a little off track there for a minute, but really seeing this process, the hands-on process that went into visually creating this city that's helping tell the story of this album, that's what makes this album special. This album cover special to me. It sparked that desire to want to tell the story of an album or a song through great design. So you're probably going to hear me say that a lot, but really, that's one thing that I truly love and one thing that I really want to do. So there you have it. This is the album cover that Launch JW creates in my mind and heart. And to this day, looking at this album cover makes me really excited about what I get to do. And that's to tell other people's stories through design. So what do you think of this album cover? Feel free to tell me in the comments below or share your thoughts with me by email at info@jwcreates.com, or you can start a conversation with me on Facebook or Instagram by following me at jdubcreates. So that's at jdubcreates. Now, to the stuff I teased about at the beginning of the video. There's a couple covers that we're going to be exploring early on. One of them is going to be Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, and the self-titled album Boston by the band Boston, obviously. We're going to be talking about cool details that you may not have seen before. Definitely going to be talking about design and maybe some cool facts and stories that you have not heard before. There's definitely one big detail from the Boston album that I completely missed for the first 5, 10, 15 years of listening to that album. I can't wait to share that with you. The second thing is the new segment that we'll be starting on the next podcast. I don't have the name 100% figured out yet, but it's going to be talking about some not very well designed album covers. Now, no need to fear. We aren't going to get super negative about them, but I want to use it as a point to talk about why having a designer make your album art for you is important. And possibly talk about things like trends, why trends may be cool for the now, but what's that thing going to look like in 3, 5, 10, 15 years? So we're going to talk about some of that kind of stuff too. So what I need from you is suggestions. Suggestions for albums that maybe aren't very well designed. But honestly, I want some suggestions on great album covers that you want me to talk about too. So leave me your suggestions in the comments below or send me an email, info@jwcreates.com. So that's it. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure that you hit the like and subscribe buttons and share this with at least one friend who likes music or great design. My name is Josh, and this was Judged by the Cover.